Hey there, and welcome back to my Wildermyth build guide series. As always, if you've been following along with these are 20 to 30 minute crash course guides targeted at players looking to optimize for the walking lunch difficulty, which is the hardest difficulty in game with the carved in stone Iron Man modifier enabled. I know it has been some time since my previous one of these. I apologize. I've been working on some other stuff, haven't had an opportunity to pull this together, and it's all good. I also realize that there is an upcoming patch coming out pretty soon. So the patch is going to change balance a little bit. I will probably do a patch review of some kind, but we'll see. Regardless, I think it's not going to change the balance too much. I think the strongest builds will still be the strongest builds, so I wanted to get this build guide out beforehand. I think that was important. I wanted to make sure I was talking accurately as of this patch, because there's going to be a lot of studying I have to do afterwards. I think that anything we do make now, though, any builds you set up will be perfectly valid for then, so don't worry about it too much. I don't think it's going to be an issue. That said, these builds are going to be functional at both the recommended starting calamities, so if you're doing all walking lunch, all max level myth walkers, the recommended starting is going to be 45 for a 3-person campaign. And then they're also going to be effective at 100 calamity starts if you really want the punishment and the challenge. So the goal here is to put this in video form for those of you that benefit from it, and to see my heroes configured in the manner I'm talking about, which I think is a lot more useful than just simply looking at it on a Steam guide or something like that. I am going to cover abilities, gear, transformations, and some variations that I consider high value. I will note in advance you can flex a few different ways, even outside of my suggestions, and still win comfortably. 100% optimization is not required in this game, okay? So you don't have to worry about that too much. The other part of this is that roughly you want at least 85% optimization. So if you have a few things wrong, a few things right, it's okay. This is also especially important if you, for instance, started a campaign or something, or started a character a long time in the past before you knew about optimizations. You don't have to necessarily throw them away. That will be fine. I'll also not be covering optimal history aspects, hook quests, or background options here. They're nuanced, and they would be the same for nearly every hero. I also made a video guide on this, so you can search my channel on the Wildermyth playlist and you'll find it. I think that is going to be more helpful than me regurgitating that information here. Otherwise, I am assuming as well that you understand some basic concepts about the game, such as flanking, cover, what gray plane means, and so forth. This video will get very long if I attempt to explain all that stuff alongside of the build. And yeah, I think that's all I really have to provide. As a reminder, do leave a comment with your ideas for other guides. I will eventually get through all of the other ones. I'm also potentially planning on doing a Sunwallower's Wake campaign playthrough at long last. And as well, like the video, subscribe, do whatever you want to do if you want to see more. I really appreciate it. These videos have been very interesting because they've been low visibility early, but they've had a very strong following over time. I feel like these videos are getting traction over time, so they're worth continuing, and I do enjoy doing them. I love this game, so I will obviously be focusing on builds I have tested and played personally, so you're probably not going to see weird stuff. I've got a couple that I want to cover, though. So yeah, what is this build guide about, you might be asking? Well, if you've read the title, you know what to expect, but I am going to be talking about the hyper-aggressive warrior. So, hyper-aggressive warrior, what does that mean? I'll say this once, and I'll say this again later. This is one of the strongest and most consistent builds in the game, bar none. It is a warrior build. It requires little support outside of some optional abilities, and it provides very little team support. What it does very effectively is kill everything, and it sets up flanks on everything. This is an important role because it means that enemies that other characters, for instance, like the hunter with backstabbing, requires flanking in order to effectively perform its job. This sets that up very effectively. I also think, I want to say up front, The reason I'm calling this hyper-aggressive warrior is because I'm not going to call it broad swipes, because every warrior build is a broad swipes build when you optimize it. If you're not taking broad swipes, you're doing something wrong, and you're actively punishing yourself. That is a difference that I think you cannot avoid. Every warrior needs broad swipes. Even if you're playing defensively, it just provides too much value. I mean, even a defensive warrior hits hard enough that it will kill random small enemies periodically and set up flanks and things. So there might be a couple builds that survive that are still non-broad swipes, but don't worry too much about them. I think they're very niche and they require extremely tailored legacies in order to be good. Let's see. The other thing is, yeah, this naturally puts warriors in a very challenging build situation. Because so many of their spells and skills are really good, you're going to want to take more skills than you can fit in a legacy, a hero rather, and that is a very challenging thing to work around. So I'm going to have a lot of options and a lot of supporting skills that you could grab if you want some variation. You do not have to, but I think you can build this like 7 different ways with a basic core and then multiple different variations on it, and it's still going to be incredibly good. So you'll also notice the core skills section below that I'm going to be talking about. It has more than 5 abilities, which is the limit that you can lock in for a Mythwalker and Legacy. Ultimately, this does, as I was saying, mean that you need to pick and choose and tweak accordingly based on the particular nuanced build you're playing, including your gear setup. So keep that in mind. Other important note, retirement age can sometimes be a problem with warriors. You know, if I go over here to stats and we look at retirement age, this can be tricky. So some transformations help with this, but there are other things of import here. You want to do all 3 of your hook quests for these characters for that +10, +7, +5 retirement age. And if you can get retirement age in your upbringing, it's pretty good too. I don't have it on this particular character, but there are some that I use that with. And you're looking for something in the high 70s, low 80s, depending on how long you spend on the overworld. It might be good either way. This will enable your hero to survive the entire 5-chapter campaign, right? Obviously, if you're doing a 3-chapter, it's not a big deal, you'll get through it. But if you're doing a 5-chapter campaign, it can be tough. You don't want your really strong, upgraded, geared out warrior retiring in chapter 4, at the end of chapter 4. That's rough. So if you can get it over that threshold, it's good. Obviously, Stormtouched, you'll notice this hero has it. All the ones I'll be talking about today have it. I hate Stormtouched. I think it's really overpowered, and I think it needs to be nerfed. And maybe one day they'll do that. If they do nerf this, then you're going to need to answer retirement some other way, or you might just need to have more warriors in your legacy to compensate. That is something I do. If you just kind of look around real quick, you'll notice I have a large number of warriors just chilling. It's kind of hard to tell because you have to look at the stances, but trust me, I have more warriors active than others. And you have to understand some of these are unplayable, right? So they're not even on the menu as far as recruiting them in combats or in runs. So I have more warriors in general for exactly this reason, so I can replace them if something goes awry. Okay, so that's all the intro I need to provide on this. Let me talk now about the core skills. Let's go back into my friend here. So there are a lot of core skills, and there's 5 base abilities that I feel very strongly about, and then there are 2 upgrades that I think are really good. So the first one I want to talk about is actually not on this hero. I gotta go look at the other one that I wanted to show off here. Up here. Yeah, cool. Blood Rage. So Blood Rage is probably... Let me think about this for a moment. It arguably is the strongest damage scaler in the entire game, right? Let's read this. Your character deals +2 damage for every 2 health they are missing. And this goes up even further with potency. So when you grab potency, you can potentially scale this 3 damage for every 2 health missing, which is insane. This represents an enormous, astronomical amount of scaling, and you can cheese this, right? There have been videos that I've seen put out where people will hurt their own warriors down to 1 HP and then give that person Aid Plus. So I might have an example of someone with Aid Plus to show you what that looks like. Let me see if I can find someone with it. You might have it. You do not have it. You might have it, friend, up here. Okay, no one has it. I don't have Aid Plus. This is an important thing to talk about because Aid Plus it requires your legacy to be configured in a way that you can provide the temporary HP so that this hero does not die automatically in combat. I think these builds are kind of gimmicky, but you can absolutely win 100 Calamity Walking Lunch with it consistently. It's very strong, but it requires you have a very tailored legacy for it. It's bad if you want to try to do that, but you have a bunch of, generically good heroes, right? So, for instance, my legacy is not well configured for this. I'd have to start a new profile and then build from there. It's pretty unlikely I'd do that. I like my heroes a lot. So, even though they're in the state that they're in. So, regardless, Blood Rage is very good even without the gimmicky sort of Aid Plus super scaling. You just intentionally play this character very aggressively, you let them take damage, and they have a lot of life, right? So we just look over here. I mean, this character has 13 life right here. That's a lot. And you can provide more in other ways, and it works out really well. And so ultimately, you just take some hits, and then you get +4 damage, and your other skills go crazy. So the next one, even more important than Blood Rage. I mean, Blood Rage is arguably the strongest skill in the game. It's way up there. Broad Swipes is pretty good. Obviously, this character has Broad Swipes Plus. I don't think the upgrade is ever really that amazing. I consider it supporting, maybe optional. We'll talk about it more later. Suffice it to say, Broad Swipes, the base ability, simply gives your attacks AoE. AoE that scales based on bonus damage and potency, which is very strong. You saw that Blood Rage scaling on potency? So does Broad Swipes. Very good. I think this is arguably so critical on a warrior that you just always have it. Period. End of story. So, it is AoE damage for all your stuff. And the important thing is that if you take something like, we'll talk about it in a little bit. Actually, I'll just jump right into it now, actually. On the other character, if you take Long Reach, the AoE of Broad Swipes is actually improved by Long Reach as well. So, this is wild. This is so good because it means that you have this huge AoE around which you just destroy everything. So that's very powerful. I think the base Long Reach is really important, and that's fine. I won't talk about the other one. The next one that I think is kind of the defining quality, in my opinion, of a hyper-aggressive warrior. There's another variant of this build that I'll talk about in a separate build video, and the reason why I'm doing that is because I think Zealous Leap Plus, specifically the upgraded version, so this is 2 legacy ability slots, is so incredible that it's hard to say no to this. This is positioning, this is movement, this is action economy, and this lets you set up any flank from any angle. It lets you optimize your AoE from Broad Swipes. You can basically just jump anywhere you want once a turn and instantly kill virtually anything in a huge AoE thanks to Long Reach. I think it is critical for this build, and you'll see I have it on both of them, both my heroes that I'm kind of demonstrating here. So I think that's excellent. I think this ability is so unbelievably good, and the base ability is okay, but being able to do it every single turn is value. The other thing to keep in mind, this scales with potency, very strong as a result. So you kind of see what I'm doing here, right? You have Blood Rage potency, Zealous Leap potency, Broad Swipes potency, and then you just kind of scale and go crazy mad with power. So very strong overall. The next one I want to cover is more easily shown on the other friend up here, Battle Dance Plus. This is an interesting one. I think for hyper-aggressive warrior builds in particular, I do not think this is good for more defensive builds, but for hyper-aggressive warriors, this is nice because it is free extra movement. This can stack with Zealous Leap for multiple hits in multiple AoE rings, and this is really important. Basically what this says is that 1, melee attacks only cost you 1 action as opposed to being turn-ending, which is really good. And then 2, after hitting with a non-swift melee attack, if you still have actions left, you can move up to half your speed as a free action. It's a free action. Free movement, literally free. This is nuts when you think about it, because it's hard to visualize, but imagine you're swarmed. You've got 5 enemies around you, okay? You attack with your first action on your turn, you kill all of them. You then get free Battle Dance, so you can Battle Dance Hop, and then do it again. And it's really good. The other really nice thing is that this kind of movement does not use your swift action, so you can spend your swift action on other things, like another attack with your head if you're using Wolf. We'll talk more about transformations later, or an AoE from your Storm Legs, which we'll also talk about later. It gives you a lot of power, right? So you have flexibility. It opens up your swift action economy a little bit. Because Zealous Leap is so demanding of your swift action, you're probably not using the other ones all that much, and it's okay because you're still killing everything, so it doesn't really matter. But I like having options. There's a lot of good reasons for that, basically, but it's nice to be able to look at a combat scenario and say, okay, I can do this, or I can do this. These have different outcomes. Both of them are available to me, and it's not a problem. So, and we already talked about long reach, so these are all really critical skills. I think those are the core skills. The next ones I want to hit on are the supporting skills. So, all right. I don't have Blood Rage Plus on a character right now, and I think it is okay. I think it is fine to consider, but Blood Rage Plus essentially says that for one turn, you can't die. There have been turns where I've put this to really good use, where I've gone to 1 HP and then just killed like 7 enemies, or used it to finish off a final boss of a capstone event in a campaign or something. It has its moments. It's once per combat, which makes it a little tricky, but I think it's fine. I don't think it's mandatory, but I would consider it an acceptable supporting skill depending on what you're shown and what your build is like. The next one, obviously, Broadswipes Plus. It doesn't do a ton. Basically, Broadswipes Plus says you do +2 bonus damage. Okay. I mean, if your bonus damage stat and potency are high enough for this build, you're probably not going to notice +2 very much. This can be really decent early game, though, right? Because enemies have lower HP, so you're seeing a higher percentage value from the baseline here. So it's not bad. I normally will never store it in Legacy, but if I'm shown it as an upgrade early, I'll probably take it instead of spending Legacy points on that reroll, because that can be risky and expensive, and you like that Legacy point value for other stuff. The next important one, Long Reach Plus. Let me see if I have an example of that. I almost certainly have it on someone here, right? No? I got it on someone. I must. Well, apparently not. Okay, well, don't ignore me. Anyway, Long Reach Plus. It's another plus 0.6 range. What does 0.6 range do, you might ask? It's a diagonal, basically. It gives you an extra diagonal on the corners, whereas a +1 gives you cardinal direction value. A plus 0.6 just gives you the diagonal. It's okay. I think it's good, quote unquote. It's better than nothing, but I don't think it adds a ton of value. It's one of those things where it's easy to say it's low value, but at the same time, it provides a ton of value in some situations. I think you can pretty easily convince me that you should grab Long Reach Plus. I think it's fair. I don't even think it's a bad take. I would grab it, right? I just don't happen to have it showable right now, which is kind of funny, but it is what it is. The next one, and I have it on one character. Let's see, not on you. We have it on... not you? Geez, I don't know who even has these abilities anymore. Okay, well, I have it. I can at least show it on my hunters, no problem. So, heroism. I think it's pretty easy to convince me that heroism is a really good skill no matter what. I have a heroism plus I can show you too. Yeah. Heroism plus says +2 action points. Especially if you're running Battle Dance, you can do some really silly things here. You can just kind of swing, jump, swing, jump, swing, jump, Zealous Leap, swing again, kill an entire room, maybe kill every single enemy in the combat, pretty much. It's really strong. This is a case of, I think the warriors struggle a lot with having build slots. You can only store so many things in Legacy, and as a result, I tend to find the core abilities more important, and I typically don't grab heroism. That said, if you're playing a brand new character or something, heroism is pretty nuts. I think it's an incredible skill. I mean, it's just extra, it basically just translates to kill another 8 enemies or something like that, which you can't say no to that, in my opinion. One that I have, actually, I can show off, or not. Man, I don't know. I just went through this character, and Here, I do have it on someone, yes. I wanted to show off Wolf Call. Basically, Wolf Call is an interesting ability because this hero is going to go first, set up flanks, kill everything. Not necessarily every enemy, but it's going to kill a lot. You're going to get kills on your turn, so you're going to get this +4 speed, and I value this pretty highly because it enables you to put your other heroes in very strong positions right away, out of the gate. So I think that's very good. And yeah, Wolf Call. I don't think Wolf Call Plus is ever worth it, but Wolf Call itself is pretty solid as a result. And then similarly, Untouchable. So Untouchable's on that character, but you can also see it up here, right? I think this is good because this hero is going to be getting kills, and it's going to be in the thick of things. You're going to be positioning this thing aggressively. It's going to take hits. It's going to be fine with taking hits, and it's going to kill enemies. So when you kill something, it is very valuable to just be immune to the next attack against you. I value Untouchable pretty highly. It's a good supporting skill. I think it's strong. And yeah, I don't think you ever need Untouchable Plus, the one that doesn't wear off, because this character is going to be sitting in hell, pretty much. So I don't think you need to be waiting around with it. That's kind of usually a dead take, in my opinion. But yeah, those are, I think, the core abilities. Those are the most important ones. So, true. It's kind of funny. I didn't even think to show you Kialera, but she's actually a really important example of this build. She's not optimized, but she's fun. She was one of my first heroes, so, I played her, and she kind of just got a bunch of random stuff, and I made the best I could out of her, but we keep her around because she's fine. Regardless, she can at least demo one important thing. I think Empowered Bone Spear on the gear side is super important if you can afford this. I think that there are some build combinations here that do this very well. I think in particular, I really do appreciate the Wolf Claw or the Bear Claw plus Empowered Bone Spear. You use the Bone Spear just to give you potency, and then otherwise you rely on your transformed arm to do all the damage. This is very good, and Bone Spear is pretty nuts. I mean, like, look at this. This is +3 potency. Hell yeah, that's incredible scaling. So that's good. It's definitely been nerfed a little bit, but I think it's still extremely strong for Zealously Broadswipe synergies. Regardless of that, I do think you can skip this if you want to. You can see one of my strong examples of this build does not even have an available arm. This is a fun variant that I set up and played, and I think it's actually way better than I expected. I'll talk a little bit more about those transforms later, but definitely consider Empowered Bone Spear if you're only doing the one-arm transformation. Otherwise, I think the default weapons are probably your best bet. You'll notice over here on Quick Zippy, I'm just using a water sword. Just a good old-fashioned water sword. I value water stunt very highly. It refunds an action point, which I think is very good. So you hit, you get a crit, and then you're good. I think that's excellent. You might think that you want a super aggressive low defense weapon here, so you might think something like Fire Sword or whatever, or maybe like an axe. But one of the nice things about Sword is that it does a ton of damage, and it also has good block and good accuracy. These things matter. So the difference between like this damage weapon and a quote-unquote defensive one is quite minimal. Consider an axe, right? An axe is pure offense, and yet outside of its shred, it doesn't do any more damage than a sword. The sword has the same base damage. Meanwhile, I would say avoid dueling swords. They're cool, but they do give up damage in exchange for their buffs. I think a normal old sword is probably my ideal choice. You get 10 block, and then you also just get a strong hit, which I think is really good. And then, yeah, you get this passive defense, which I think is huge. The +5 melee accuracy, it also adds up. I do think this matters. You can't afford to miss, right? Because if you jump in and you whiff, that's pretty rough. So I think this is a very good balance. I also think spears are really good if you want to go with a water spear. It gives you extra range, which I think is good. You give up that melee accuracy, and the range is a big upside. Pros and cons, right? Your mileage may vary. I tend to believe in the sword, personally, so it's fine. But these are just strong considerations. The other one that I want to talk about, speaking of swords, is Night Shard. This is a very interesting artifact. I don't typically use a lot of random non-empowered Bone Spear artifacts, but this is one of them that I think is really good. It's extraordinarily good because it adds dodge. It adds 5, 10, 15 dodge when you upgrade. You can see over here. That's nuts, right? You intentionally lower your health to a good blood rage point, you apply some temporary HP, and then you get tons of passive dodge and block out of this. This is so much defense, and you don't even give up damage on this, right? It just doesn't even cost you anything. The only thing this doesn't have is the water stunt, which is fine, right? And it still even has +1 stunt damage, so it kind of offsets it just in a fine way, right? Like the water stunt doesn't have that bonus damage, whereas the Night Shard does. This relic's really good. I pretty strongly recommend it for this build if you're going the one-handed option. It's good to do, for instance, a water attack. You get the stunt, you then swap because you can't get the water stunt multiple times, and then you end your turn on Night Shard, so when the enemies have their turn and attack you, you get the bonus. It's really good. I'm a big fan of that mix. So, there are also some really good combos here, some good different artifacts. I don't have examples of them. No, I don't. I don't have examples of them, but at the same time, it's okay because I'll just show you kind of what they look like, or what they are. I can't demo it, unfortunately. I don't have any of them set up, but one of them is the Hail Hammer. But basically, normally this weapon is better with the knockback and stun on stunt for the defensive variant of this build, which I'll, again, talk about in a different video. But it's still worthwhile to consider for the offensive version. It completely disables capstone bosses, so they never even swing on you while you're doing a ton of damage, which can be really good. Your mileage may vary. I typically just like killing the enemies, but stunning them is pretty good. Hail Hammer's worth considering. There is another sword that might be okay. I consider this lower ranking, but the Bale Blade is one of the new ones. It gives you a bunch of temporary HP when you hit, which is fine, but unfortunately it's only 1 per hit, so it's not very much. I haven't personally used it, but it should theoretically be okay if you find it, right? Like, say you don't want to grind for something else, like you can't find Night Shard or whatever. In that universe, you could just grab a Bale Blade if you have it acceptable and around. I'm also going to point out, I don't think I have anyone to showcase it. I might actually. No, I don't. I think I do. I was going to talk about the Dragon Paw Shield. I don't use it on anyone right now, but I do think it's pretty decent. It essentially adds plus 0.5 damage, which I think is good. It's the shield you want for the build if you have the free offhand slot. It is bonus damage. Obviously, plus 0.5 doesn't actually make you stronger unless you have a piece of gear that gives you the other bit. You do get some from leveling up, right? You just look over here, bonus damage. You can see you get like 0.6. So there are thresholds where you'll pick up a +1 here, but I don't know. It's tough. It offsets the blue skin, I guess, at least, but it's a strange one. I really love, actually, the Ice Shield instead, though. If you're running Night Shard, I do strongly encourage you to run the Ice Shield because the passive defense is huge. Consider that, where is it? Ice Shield gives you +1 warding, which I consider very valuable on a warrior that otherwise can't benefit from get a lot of warding on its own. So I personally use Ice Shields pretty constantly here. I think that's good. It's also free damage and it hobbles enemies, which I think has benefited me a lot over time. It's hard to identify exactly when it's adding a lot of value, but I do think it's good. Otherwise, you're just looking for stunt chance and potency scaling gear when you find it, right? You're just looking for any of this stuff. Potency is obviously really good, scales all your abilities. Stunt chance gives you that really good water strike, which lets you jump and then do the Night Shard switch, which I think is very powerful. So, yeah, it's not necessary, but I think every little bit you can spare here helps a lot. Alright, let's talk transformations now. So, in general, I would say Crow Wings are marginally superior here because compared to some like higher speed variation wings because of the +10 dodge. And you can make up that lost speed with Zealous Leap, right? You're clearing so much of the arena by just jumping around that the extra 0.4 speed on, for instance, Draven wings is not going to be that beneficial. It's one of the reasons why my 2 super optimized versions of this build, you know, Quick Zippy and our Jumpy Boy over here, Caliban. They both use crow wings. I think it is superior. So keep that in mind. I don't think it's wrong necessarily to have the other ones. It's better to have at least any wings, but yeah, fair enough. Let's see. Otherwise, I strongly value Foxtail on this, but I also respect the value of a Scorpioid Tail. I think Scorpion Tail is much stronger if you are doing Blood Rage stacking. If your legacy is going to be Blood Rage stacking plus A+, and you're just getting temp HP, then Scorpioid Tail gives you really good AoE cleave with a lot of range. I think it's very strong. The other nice thing is that it requires less out of your attacking arms, so you don't need to transform your arms necessarily, because you can have like an empowered bone spear in one, you can have a shield in the other, and then you can just Scorpioid sting everything. I think it's really good. That said, for the way I personally play these builds, I do like Foxtail a lot. The stunt chance is good for the water stunt, and then the dodge is really strong, and the speed is not critical, but helpful. It offsets some bad numbers when you age in the game, so it's good. Spell-touched, obviously mandatory in this case, I think, for the optimization. It's just good. It's just good business. Blue skin. So remember, if you're setting this up, get this first, right? Because it's going to be incompatible with a lot of the other transforms, so make sure you're doing it right. Let's see, other things. Next, I want to talk about Wolf. We can show off this man. So Wolf is pretty awesome. There's two things that really stand out about Wolf as to why it's really good. First, the Wolf Claw is a water stunt. Let me see if I can go to combat and show this to you. Yeah. So Wolf Claw is a water stunt effect, which I think is really good. It's actually not showing, which is kind of odd. Interesting. I don't think that got hotfixed while I was changing this, but it... Let me see if I can see this. Wolf Claw? Yeah, I'm pretty confident that's a water stunt. If this did get changed, that's a little crazy to me, but I don't think it did. Interesting. Huh. Maybe I'll look into that after this. This might have changed. If that changed, that's unfortunate. It used to be a water stunt, or I think it still might be, but I'm not actually sure. I don't want to tell you something and be wrong. So, but I think it used to display it. Anyway, the water stunt does matter here. If they change that, then this is a little bit less good, but it's still strong because I think that matters. Whereas like a water stunt that scales with potency is pretty good. So you can't really go wrong with that. I did, in this case, go both arms for the Frenzy. I wanted to test this build out. One of the nice things about Wolf Frenzy in this case is that it hits 3 times. So you add your scaling off the back of bonus damage and things, and you can get some massive numbers here. And the other nice thing is, because your damage is spread over 3 hits, it means that you're basically 100% guaranteed to kill everything you attack, which is nice. I like it a lot. I tried this build out and I was pleasantly surprised with it. I do think that the Empowered Bone Spear variant is potentially slightly stronger because you just get free potency, right? But this has been surprisingly effective and extremely consistent, which I think is probably the strongest thing in its favor. It's very accurate. You actually see 100% kill chances. There's no 99% or anything. It's guaranteed, basically. So I think that's really good. Wolf legs are fairly good if you want to go that route. They give you speed. I also think the wolf head is pretty decent. It gives you an attack. Let's see if I can pull it up. Yeah, you get a wolf bite, which is a swift action. You just give him a chomp. This does trigger broad swipes, which is pretty cool. You can, if you have a free swift action on your turn that you're not using for Zealous Leap, you can just chomp and get more damage, which is very nice. Wolf is good. The next one I want to talk about is Mortificial Enhancements. You can see I've done the legs here. There's an important reason to consider Mortificial Enhancements. They're basically the same as Wolf Legs. You get the speed buff, but you give up a little bit of dodge for it. So you might ask me why I would do this. The answer is it frees up your head slot. I have intentionally kept this hero's head slot open because I want to make sure I can have it available to experiment with other builds, right? I could take some other head here, and that opens up a lot of options, actually. Whereas when you have to take Wolf, you always transform your head first, so you're kind of committed, right? This is much more open. I do this personally because maybe I want to keep the slot open for an upcoming change. Maybe they add a new transformation in the future, or maybe they rebalance something and I want to try it. So that's why I have this character set up like this. But that's kind of the reason why you might consider Mortificial, is so you can do a different head. Something maybe like a frog head could even be good here, right? So you pull enemies in and then you smash them, which is another option. So I do think the next one I want to hit on, Stormtouched, is really good. I think this one gets a bad rap, but one of the big advantages of Stormtouched is that you can get the legs without getting the head, which means that it's excellent for purposes of just building up the Thunder Stomp, right? This is good for setting up flanks in a huge range, because the range scales with potency, which is very powerful in my opinion. So you're already giving this thing potency. You can then use this as your swift action, proc flanking on everything in the area, and then your backstab hunter can go walk around and just kill 5 different enemies, no problem. This is also nice because with enough stunt chance, which you're already giving this build, then this becomes fairly consistent at stunning enemies, which is actually kind of wild. Sometimes this stuns things for me, and I'm just thinking to myself, oh, well, that just trivialized the combat. So I love it when that works out. Let's see. Otherwise, this is good with Battle Dance Plus, right? Because you can use Thunder Stomp here in order to scale, get the flanks, and then if you have an enemy in range to hit, so that you can get the Battle Dance Plus jump, you can then benefit from your own flanking and just kill enemies that way. And it's pretty cool. As far as pets go, there are a couple options. On this build with the Wolf Frenzy, you have 100% accuracy notionally, thanks to the multiple hits. So I think the plus bonus damage from Avenger is really strong. You love just doing more damage. I think I'm aiming towards a Critter for this other one, which I have not gotten yet. But Critter is really good because if you're not 100% accurate, then you want to make sure this build is hitting, right? So I think Critter is very strong here as well. And just to show you what Critter looks like, you can see Critter up here. That's a Critter. Critter gives plus 15 melee accuracy, which is extremely powerful. I would avoid the defensive pets like Duck or Rat. You don't really have time for that in this build. I don't think it's going to benefit you the way you want. So, but yeah, I think that covers everything in this particular one. All of these videos have always been running a little long. I say 20 to 30 minutes, and then they run 37 minutes, and it's kind of just the nature of the thing, but it's fair. You'll forgive me. It's all important information anyway, so. But yeah, as promised, and once more, I will say, like I promised, this is one of the strongest builds in the game, bar none. I think this is extremely consistent. I almost always have some variation of this build in every single run I play, period. Maybe they use Blood Rage, maybe they don't. Maybe they use some of the other supporting skills. You can see this one does not use Blood Rage, whereas my other one that I was showing off does. This is a much more kind of focused offensive build that's kind of a little metered. It's like a sliding scale, right? You can scale the offense versus the defense as needed, and as long as you're over a certain threshold, you're playing the aggressive build. Basically, the threshold is, are you running Zealous Leap? Because the defensive version of this build does not run Zealous Leap, and you take other skills instead, and ultimately that's kind of the main difference. But Zealous Leap is really aggro, very strong, huge fan. I think this is so important, so strong. So, but yeah, the build does want support from its allies in the form of Aid Plus, like I said before, if you're running Blood Rage and trying to go the hyperscaling, so keep that in mind. It is very legacy dependent. It can be tough to configure, especially if you're playing blind, or if you're trying to do a campaign where you have to create new characters, like Age of Ulstrix, for instance. That's a very tough one to try to configure a Battle Rage setup in, but still, it should work out if you're using Legacy at least. Otherwise, I think that you can still play this build fairly passively, so you're aggressive, but you're not actively killing yourself. That's kind of what I do here on Quick Zippy. You know, I have the Blood Rage. She takes hits, it's fine, and she scales herself as she gets hit. She usually lives at around 50% HP on average, and it makes it very strong. So that certainly works very effectively at 100 calamities as well. But no matter how you slice it, once built, this will shred enemies at the highest difficulty. So have fun. I enjoy this build a lot. I think it's very popular. A lot of people use some variant of it, so hell yeah. And I think that's all I've got for you. So hey, thanks a lot for watching this. I really appreciate your time. As always, you can give the video a like or a dislike if you want. You can subscribe to the channel if you want to see more, and stay tuned for what's next. Take care, folks.